Hey guys, it's Big Mike. Like always, I'd like to thank you for being here today. Today we have Josh from NinjaTrader. This is the second time he'll be presenting on strategy development for NinjaTrader. If you missed his last webinar, it was about a month ago, and you can find it in the webinar section on BMT. Today Josh is going to talk about entering and exiting positions using managed orders. He's going to talk about the rules for order handling when working within the managed orders. And also the differences between order handling flexibility versus ease of programming when you use IOrders or unmanaged orders. As you guys have questions today, type them into the questions box and they will show up to both Josh and myself. I'm sure that Josh will do his best to answer everyone's questions. Do try to keep them on topic to whatever he's discussing at the time. And the recording for the webinar will be uploaded sometime tomorrow if you guys want to go back and review anything later. Okay guys, give me 1 second and I'll be turning things over to Josh. Hang on.
Okay, just testing. Can you guys hear me, and is my screen projecting okay right now?
Yeah, we can hear you, and I've got your main screen.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Mike, for this second opportunity to present here with you guys today. I want to thank everybody for joining me here today as well. And my goals for today's webinar is just basically to kind of help you guys through some of the confusion that I've seen before among newer users for all of the various order placement methods available in NinjaTrader. So just a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are today is, back when I started NinjaTrader way back in NinjaTrader 6, not NinjaTrader 7, so from 6 to 6.5 to 7, we've increased the flexibility in the various order placement available to users, but at the cost of adding this kind of confusion as to, hey, which one should I be using? How should I be going about placing orders and things like that in my own strategies? So back in NinjaTrader 6, we only really had one approach for order placement. Everything was pretty simple. You only had to learn one thing, and that was the only way you could place orders. And then since then, we've added more advanced types of features, advanced functionalities, which kind of opened up the programming for more flexibility, but like I said, at the cost of newer users needing to read more material and things like that. So I can understand it being a little bit more daunting the task to try and get into the NinjaScript strategy and figuring out how you want to place orders and things like that. So what I want to start with is just to bring up our NinjaTrader help guide first, just because this is probably the best place you can find information on everything I'm going to be talking about here today. And it's just a great, you have a document with everything I'm going to talk about today, probably a little bit more in depth than I'm going to be talking about today as well. So it's a great read through after this webinar if you guys need further questions answered and things like that. So if you guys go to your control center in NinjaTrader, you can go the help and just press this help one, and then it brings up the help guide here. And what I have on my current help guide is I've navigated to the NinjaScript section, and then from there in the language reference strategy, if you scroll on down to order methods, this is basically the centralized hub of all the information for how you can place orders in your NinjaScript strategies. So definitely go through and read these pages, as it contains just invaluable information as to how you can place your orders. But I'm going to be talking about a little bit about this stuff in its concept and show you guys a little bit about it in practice here today as well. So just to start off, NinjaTrader has essentially, we have 3 different types of order placement techniques, if you will, available to you guys when you guys are programming your strategies. The first one would be the basic managed approach. Second one would be a advanced managed approach, and the last one would be this unmanaged approach. So I'll go over each one a little bit today, and the various options are, they're loosely tied to what your level of programming is. So if you think you are pretty new at programming, you want to go ahead and try using the basic managed approach first. If you feel you're a really advanced programmer and a really advanced trader, you can go ahead and try the unmanaged approach with the understanding that it requires a little bit more programming to get that unmanaged approach to work the way you would like it to work. Now, the benefits of the unmanaged approach versus the two managed approaches is that the unmanaged approach, it allows the most flexibility in how you can program a strategy, while the managed approaches, they allow you the most convenience in programming your strategy. So there's kind of a trade-off that you guys, trade-off decision to be made here. You can only choose one approach at a time, so you can't go, I want some of my strategy to be handled under the unmanaged approach and some of them to be handled under the managed approach. You got to choose one or the other. And I guess the best place to start would be to talk about the basic approach, or the most basic managed approach. So I'm going to assume you guys are already familiar with how to create a strategy just to start up. So I'm using the strategy wizard really quickly just to get my format for my strategy up. And then over here we have the strategy or the NinjaScript editor. And to use the basic managed approach, you don't have to do anything special in the NinjaScript editor. Later on, when we go to the unmanaged approach, there's going to be a few extra lines of code we need to inject into this initialize method up here to get it to use the unmanaged approach. But for the managed approaches, these are the default option, or the default order placement method that NinjaTrader will assume you're using. So to start off, all you have to do to use the basic approach is just start typing your code. You don't have to do anything special. Let's say if we wanted to place an order at the open price, or if the close price is greater than the open price, let's go ahead and go long, something like that. You can go, if open is greater than close, we want to go enter long. Now, this enter long, if you're not sure where I got that from, you can see in the help guide over here on the right, we have all of the various order placement methods available under the managed approach. So you have enter long limit, enter long stop, then you have all your shorts. You can do exit methods as well. And basically, they're pretty self-explanatory. If you type enter long, that basically means you want to go long in your strategy. And then if you leave it as a empty bracket like that, it just uses the default values and the default quantity to get you into a position. Now, if you wanted to fine-tune that a little bit, if you click on this enter long page in the help guide, you can see you have a little bit different syntaxes available here. You can type in, how many shares I want to buy or how many contracts I want to buy. I can give it a signal name. Signal name is basically just an identifier for yourself, just to keep track of which one of your entry logic or entry orders you were using to get yourself into a position. So, it's pretty self-explanatory right now, this basic approach. If I wanted to buy 5 contracts, for instance, I can type in a quantity of 5 using this particular syntax up here, enter long integer quantity. And then I can mix it up however I want. If I wanted to close this position, maybe if the close price is lower than the open price, I want to go ahead and close this position. I can go exit long, and then I can also go, I want to use a quantity of 5 here, so I can go 5 and then close that out. So that's really basically, that is the basic managed approach, what I have on the screen right now. It's you type in, I want to go enter long, I want to go exit long, enter short, exit short, things like that. Now, some of the nuances and intricacies that you want to pay attention to when using this basic approach is that if you start using limit orders, so let's say I switch this to an enter long limit instead, and then let's go ahead and say our limit price is, I don't know, let's go with the close price of the current bar, and then string name, I will give it some limit order. And then if I start using limit orders, what happens is that the way this basic approach works is that it will keep your orders active, your limit orders active, as long as the code sees that you're trying to enter a long limit on every single on-bar update. So the moment it reaches an on-bar update that does not say that it needs to go enter long limit, it will cancel the pre-existing limit order and then expire that, essentially. So there's no need to actively go, oh, I want to cancel my limit order. The limit order is only active until you stop calling this enter long limit. So basically right now what my code is saying is that if the open price is greater than close price, I want to have a limit order at the close price to go long. And this limit order will be active for every single bar that the open price is greater than the close price. The moment that the open price is not greater than the close price, this limit order will be canceled and it will be automatically expired. So that's the way that the basic managed approach works. You don't have to actively cancel orders. They will, they take care of themselves basically. So there's that convenience level in that, but you just have to understand that you want to keep calling this enter long limit if you want it to be active for multiple bars. In this webinar, if I talk about topics that seem a little bit more advanced, definitely type a question and tell me to stop or slow down a little bit, and I can definitely answer those. I'm just not sure if I'm going too broad a scope of the programming aspect of this right now. But back to the managed approach in the help guide, we definitely want to go ahead and look at the managed approach page right here. And what I've just talked about is in this entry methods section here. So we talk about a little bit about how you want to place orders. You can just call enter long. You can call enter long limit, however you want to call it in your code. And then there are things that you want to pay attention to down here, which is the entries per direction and entry handling. So there's two properties in NinjaTrader, and they're called the entries per direction and entry handling. You can define them in your initialize method. So for instance, let's go with entry handling here. Let's go entry handling equals, and let's go to the help page for that, and it shows you what values you have. So you have all entries and unique entries. So if we go entry handling equals entry handling all entries, and we pair that with an entries per direction of 2. What this means is that out of all of our entry orders, if we had something like, let's go over here, if we had something like enter long and then we called enter long again, so essentially we're now calling enter long 2 times, enter long limit once. So we essentially have 3 entry orders. What these two properties up top, what this defines is how those 3 entry orders are handled. When you go with all entries, what it means is that out of all of our entries, we only want to have entries per direction of 2, meaning we only want to have 2 of these be active. So since we actually have 3, this third one will be ignored. Since we are only allowing 2 entries per direction, hopefully that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it clearly enough, but when you go enter long once, we're entering the position in the long direction once, and when we call enter long a second time, we're going with a second entry. So these two properties determine how you want to go ahead and allow for a scale-in strategy or a scale-out strategy. By default, your entries per direction is set to 1, and your entry handling is set to all entries. And what that does is it prevents you from scaling in. So if you guys have a scale-in strategy, you want to go ahead and increase your entries per direction, or you can change your entry handling to unique entries. And what unique entries does is that it says that you can have, right now, if we leave entries per direction as 1 and we use entry handling as unique entries, what it does is it allows our strategy to say, I want to enter I want to place in one order for every single one of my quote-unquote unique entries. And a unique entry is defined by your signal name. So right here I have sum limit order as a signal name. If I had another enter long limit with that exact same signal name, that would be blocked by this by this entry handling of unique entries and entries per direction of 1. Now if I set that to 2, that will allow my second one of this same unique entry to go in. So there's just a little bit flexibility or option choice that you guys can roll with for if you guys need to create scale-in strategies that you want to use this entry handling and entries per direction properties over here. And those, again, those go into your initialize method. But if you guys are not worrying about scale-in strategies, you guys are just keeping it simple right now, you want to go ahead and use an entry per direction as well. So with that set to 1, we can talk about, let's see what we want to talk about next. Let's talk about your time in force. Time in force and quantity type. So quantity type, when you run your strategy, let's say you're running your strategy in the strategy analyzer, you have this option over here called set order quantity. This is determined, or this basically determines how many shares or how many contracts your strategy is going to be buying. If you set it by strategy, which is the default setting, what that means is that it's going to go ahead and read your code and look at, oh, I had an exit long of 5, so I'm only going to exit 5 contracts. And what that does is it says, I'm going to follow whatever I program into my strategy will be the order quantity of my strategy orders. Now I can change that to be something like default quantity, and that allows me to type in I want a default quantity of 10 contracts, for instance, and I'll go ahead and change all of your entry orders to use a quantity of 10 instead of whatever is hard-coded into the strategy code over here. And then you can change that by account size, which is basically, let's say I have $25,000 account. I can type that in, and then it'll try and dynamically adjust your entry quantity to match your account size. So those are some various options that you have available for adjusting your orders in your strategy. And then the time in force you have available is, you can go with good to cancel, or you can go day orders. That's up to you how you want to handle that. So these are just some of the properties available for your order or placement. But back to the managed approach. Basically, with the managed approach, it's, you get what you see. You type in, I want to go enter long. It goes enter long. And the other things I want to talk about is the internal order handling rules for this this basic method. So the basic method is called our basic method because NinjaTrader, basically we lay on top of these order methods a convenience layer that tries to handle any of the problems that may arise when you place orders, any of the rejected orders, cancel order, things like that. We try to handle that all for you instead of having you need to program it and handle that yourself. And these rules describe how we do that in NinjaTrader. And you want to, you do want to become familiar with these rules as they outline how you can place your orders. Basically, without discussing every single rule, what is outlined in this page right here is just basically, it says that you can't place competing orders into the market at the same time. By competing orders, I mean you can't do something like enter long and then call enter short at the same time. So you can't go you can't do something like enter long and enter short. What these orders do is they're competing against each other, and NinjaTrader doesn't exactly know how to do that within the managed approach. Because what happens when you go enter long, let's say you went enter long and then your long position got filled. Then NinjaTrader saw an enter short. What NinjaTrader does is that it sees that you're trying to go into a short position, but it knows you're already in a long position. And what NinjaTrader will automatically do is it will automatically close your long position first and then get you into a short position. This convenience, which allows you to reverse your position without actually needing to call an exit long before you go enter short, is what causes conflict with the strategy when you do something like enter long and then enter short. Because when you call both of these competing orders at the same time, what happens, or what could happen, is that you could get filled on your long position and you could get filled on your short position immediately afterwards before NinjaTrader actually knows your long position was filled. And what happens is that if you got filled on your long and you got filled on your short at the same time, you essentially end up with a flat position. You were expecting, based on the behavior I described earlier, you were expecting that if you called enter long and then enter short after enter long, that you would end up with a short position if the short, the enter short got filled. But instead, you might end up with a flat position. So,
hey, Josh.
What these yes.
A question from John. John wants to know: is it possible to use a third-party add-on, some kind of an indicator, and use the data produced by that indicator to enter a trade, even though the indicator does not show up in the indicator list?
John, that's a good question, and that really depends on how the indicator is programmed by the third party. Some guys will program it in a manner that allows you to actually program against it. So if your third party indicator they allowed access to the various plot values, then you can definitely grab those indicator plot values and then use it in your own programming, even though it doesn't show up in your this list over here with your edit indicator. Even if it doesn't show up in this list, you more or less can still use it. You just have to know what the indicator name is and what the plot names are, and the best way to figure that out is actually to ask the developer of that indicator if they have that available to you. I know some third-party indicators do not have that available though, so it really depends on who you got that indicator from. So unfortunately, I can't give you a better answer than that, John. Bob, you had a question. I have some questions about indicators and everything. If they do not program it so that we can program against data, how can we get to it? Bob, if the developer of your indicator has created an indicator in a way that is not exposed to your strategy, meaning you can't access the values, then unfortunately you will not be able to access those values. The best thing you can do is probably ask, send an email into whoever you got the indicator from and ask them if that's something that they are willing to make available in the future. Now, I know some of our third-party developers, they developed their indicators in a way that did not have it to begin with because they didn't think people would use it. And then once they started getting requests, they went ahead and changed that and added that flexibility in for you guys. But some other developers or some other third-party vendors, they consciously decided not to add that in. They actually did not want you guys to have that flexibility. So it's really up to them. But for the most part, you guys should be able to get the values in your indicators. And Bob says some of the GOMIs are open and others are not. Bob, I believe that may be the case.
I think, Bob, though, when you're talking about some of the GOMI stuff, it's not that he's purposely closed values. It's that he's never, the ability to make those values public was never part of the original code. So, some vendors are like that, to where they never, exposed the value to begin with, and some of them purposely make it to where you cannot get to the values. So it just depends on what's going on.
Okay. And E-mini, you had a question, can we bracket a buy and sell order at the same time around a report? E-mini, so that's actually a little bit on topic as to what we're discussing right now. I was talking about these order handling rules that are around in the managed approach, which essentially prevents you from bracketing your orders. So, like if you had a enter long limit and then you had an enter short limit, if you're trying to bracket both sides of your trade, you can't. The managed approach will not let you do this. It will not let you go enter long limit and have a limit order sitting up top, and enter short limit and have a limit order sitting on the bottom there. What you can do to mimic a bracket in the managed approach is that you can have it. You can check the prices, your current price, and if it's closer to your upper bracket, you want to go ahead and submit into. You want to go ahead and keep active your upper brackets order. And if you had if the closing price or the current price starts shifting downwards and becomes closer to your lower bracket, you can go ahead and cancel out the top order, your top bracket order, and submit your lower bracket order. Now that does come with the, it's not a perfect scenario for bracketing when you do that though, because it comes at the risk of, oh, well, I was in the process of canceling my top bracket and then in the process of submitting my lower bracket, but the price went way past the lower bracket already, so I didn't get the desired price. So you run the risk of not getting your desired price when you do this kind of quote-unquote workaround, and you also risk losing your queue, your place in line. Basically, you're not going to get a good queue position when you keep canceling limit orders and placing new ones in. But that's how you can bracket with the managed approach. If you find those, I guess, drawbacks acceptable, then I definitely still recommend using the limit or the managed approach. If you don't find those acceptable, you can go ahead and switch to the unmanaged approach, which allows you to place bracket orders. The unmanaged approach, like I mentioned in the beginning, does not come with any of the convenience layers, does not come with any of these order handling rules, so it will not prevent you from doing something like putting in a long limit and a short limit at the same time. So that's how you go ahead and bracket your orders in NinjaTrader. Barry had a question about, can you discuss limiting round trips with entries per direction? Barry, limiting round trips would not necessarily be handled by entries per direction. The way you would want to limit the number of round trips is you want to create your own variables to do that. So let's say you wanted to create something like a counter. You can create private in trade counter, for instance, and we'll start with a count of 0 up on the top. And anytime you get into a position, let's say you called enter long, for instance. If you called enter long and then that order got filled, then you can go ahead and go trade counter plus plus, which basically just increments your trade counter. And then you only, in your if statement, you can go if trade counter is less than 10 or something like that. If it's less than 10, then I want to keep trading. If it's greater than 10, then I don't want to trade anymore. So that limits your number of round trips. And then you want to also reset your counter at the beginning of each day if you wanted to go with if you wanted like a monthly limit or a daily limit, you reset it whenever you feel like you need to reset the counter. If it's a daily limit, you can reset it by doing something like first bar of the session. So if it's the very beginning of a new session, you want to go ahead and your trade counter is back to 0, for instance. So that's how you can go ahead and limit the number of round trips there, Barry. Hopefully that answers your question. But back to the order handling rules we were discussing. The order handling rules, it prevents you from entering in the opposite directions at the same time. Now, earlier I was just mentioning it with enter orders. The exact same scenario and reasoning exists for if you had exit orders working. So if you had something like an exit long limit active, you can't go, you can't, let's see what you can't do. You can't also tag that up with, if you had an exit long limit, you can't have in working enter, let's say, short limit at the same time. So it's the exact same reasonings, or you can't also have any of these set methods. So if you were using with set stop loss, for instance, if you had a set stop loss, you can't mix that with a enter long limit, for instance. So there are things that are discussed in this section that you want to go ahead and read. I know I'm not discussing it too much right now because there's a lot of intricacies in these rules, but you want to go ahead and read through all of these and just get a basic familiarity with what is available there. And you don't have to keep them in mind all the time, because when you're running your strategy and you break one of these rules, what will happen is that in your Control Center log tab, it'll give you a little log message here, and you can also see that message in the output window if you have your trace orders on. So if you had something like trace orders equals true, you'll see a little message that says one of these internal order handling rules was broken and one of your orders was ignored or something like that. So you don't necessarily have to keep these in mind all the time. You just have to know that they exist, and if your strategy breaks one of the rules, that you know that to come into your log tab and just review them and see if that actually happened. And if it did happen, then you want to go back and analyze your strategy code as to maybe which one of these rules was broken, and then go ahead and address your strategy from there. Now that's basically that's essentially the basic managed approach in a really brief nutshell. Now I'm going to talk about the advanced managed approaches, which just builds on all of the concepts that we talked about here with order placement, with order handling, with the basic approach, and takes it to the next level. And you can find information on that if you click on this advanced order handling page in the help guide. And this information talks about the advanced managed approach. So the internal handling rules or internal order handling rules are still applicable to this advanced managed approach. They're only not applicable to the unmanaged approach. So the difference between the advanced approach here is that we are now using what we call an IOrder object. So an IOrder object over here, if we click on it, is basically all of your enter commands. Like if you go enter long, they're stored in an object that's called an IOrder object. And this object, you can use this object to get information about the order and do more advanced things than what you can do in on-bar update. So along with this advanced method comes additional event methods than just on-bar update. So right now in your managed or your basic managed approach, you're only using this on-bar update. So you get an event on every single update of a bar. But what you can do with the advanced approach is that you can also use additional event methods like the, let's say, on order update here. So on order update on your screen right now, I'm showing in the help guide, basically you get an event when an order updates. So what this allows you to do is, let's just go ahead and add this in. Override void. What this allows you to do is it allows you to fine-tune when you want to put in your stop losses, fine-tune things like when you want to cancel orders. So let's say we did something like this. Let me go ahead and create a IOrder object here, entry order. If we had this entry order, so you'll notice that I created an IOrder object up top, and I said this IOrder object is this enter long. What that does is that stores this enter long order. It stores this order into this order object I created called entry order. And now if I come into my on order update, I can do things like check for this entry order. So if my entry order does not equal null, and the reason I'm checking for null is there are programming requirements, I guess, with using object-oriented programming, which requires you to check if the object is null before referencing things like that. So you actually want to go if it's not null, because I actually want to use it. If it's not null and the entry order is equal to my order. So if you notice up here, the on order update takes in a an input, basically. It's inputted in as order. Every time this event is triggered, it's triggered based off of an order doing something. And what I'm doing right now in my code is I'm saying I'm checking to see if the order that triggered this on order update is my entry order. So I'm checking, is my entry order equal to the order that triggered this on order update? Then I'm going to go ahead and do something. So I can go ahead and say, oh, it's my entry order over here, which is my enter long, that triggered my on order update. Then I want to go ahead and see if what the order state is. I want to go ahead and do something like if the order state is dot filled. So if my order is filled, then I want to go ahead and place in some exit orders now. So let's say I wanted to do something like exit long limit here, and then I can fill that in. Let's just say 100 for the price. Exit. And then I wanted to do, maybe a stop as well. So, I don't know what my stop price is, 50. So what I've done here is I've said instead, or what I've done is I said immediately once my entry order of enter long is filled, I want to go ahead and place in exit orders, or I want to bracket my trade with protected exit orders. I'm bracketing with a limit up on the top and a stop on the bottom. And that's just basically when I do it this way, I have more flexibility in controlling when exactly my protective stops are placed into the market. One other thing that you want to take note is that if you remember earlier when we talked about when are these exit orders canceled, they're canceled the moment you stop calling this exit long limit. But the problem with using exit long limit and exit long stop here is that you're not going to be calling these methods more than once. So if we left the code as it is right now, these orders would be canceled immediately, and that comes back to our advanced order handling page with live until cancel orders over here, this section here. And what you want to do is that you actually want to utilize, if we go to like enter long limit, we want to utilize this property here called live until canceled. So to use that, we actually need to change our whole syntax here to use the one that has the live until cancel. So if I press my down arrow, I can cycle through the various signatures, and we can see signature number 2 has a bool called live until cancel. So we want to go ahead and fill out all the parameters with this particular signature. So bars in progress is 0 if you have a single series strategy. You only need to use bars in progress greater than 0 if you start using a multi-series strategy, but that's, I guess, I will not be discussing multi-series strategy here today. But for live until cancel, I want to set that to true. my quantity, let's say I exiting one contract, my double limit price is just going to be 100. My string will be exit limit, and my from entry signal will be, I can leave that blank, so I'm just going to leave it as a generic blank string there. And then the same carries over to my exit long stop. I need to do the same thing. I need to set this to true, quantity of 1, my stop price, and then my string. So what I've done now is that I've set it to be live until canceled, meaning I don't need to keep calling this order for this order to cancel. Now that also means that this order is active until it either fills or is expired at the end of the day, depending on your time in force. But it will remain active until, it will just remain active. So what you need to do is that you need to now either program in when you want this order to cancel. So let's say if you've been in the market for 10 bars already, so if bars since entry is greater than 10 bars, you want to go ahead and just cancel these orders, then you can go cancel order. Now if you see the cancel order, it's asking for an input of an IOrder object. And if you look down here, I've actually not created an IOrder object for any of these exits, so I need to create IOrder objects for these. So I can go exit limit equals that, and I can go exit stop equals that, and then up on the top I need to create more IOrders, so I can go private IOrder exit limit equals null, and I can go exit stop equals null. And then when I come up here, if I've been in the position for greater than 10 bars, I want to go ahead and cancel my exit limit, and I also want to go ahead and cancel my exit stop. So that's how you can cancel orders. So you can see that with the basic approach, you are not managing when you can cancel your orders. NinjaTrader automatically cancel orders for you, depending on assumptions it made based on your code. And you can see with the advanced approach, we've taken off that that hand holding over there and allowed you to manage exactly when you want to cancel your orders, when you want to submit your orders, and things like that. So with this advanced managed approach, you're getting additional layers of flexibility, but at the cost of more programming. So you can see the trade-off there that you need to start doing as you start advancing up the various tiers of order placement and things like that. So we had a few questions. Yui said, work this over on order update given exit limit order true as intrabar exit. Yui, I'm not exactly sure what you meant with that question. If you could rephrase that for me a little bit, then I can definitely answer that. So I didn't quite understand what you meant with that.
He might be saying,
Mark had a question, how would you have it?
He might be saying, does that work intrabar? Is it tick by tick?
I see. You. That's a good question. On order update works intrabar. What it does is it's independent of whether you have calculate on bar close set to true or false. Calculate on bar close impacts your on bar update, but it does not impact the events of on order update. So on order update is triggered when an order does something. So when an order does something, what I mean by when an order does something, I mean when it goes from either pending submit to accepted to working or to a partial fill or to a filled state. So anytime you have an order change its order state is when this on order update will trigger. It triggers on every single one of your orders. That's why you need to identify which one of your orders was the order that.
On the code on line 70 to 71, that's only going to be executed at the instant that the order is filled. If you want to modify a stop or a target to a different price, then you would need to move it somewhere else in the code, like on bar update. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. So this is only for the initial placement of your orders. Once they get placed, that's where they will sit until we modify the orders either in on-bar update, or maybe we had another event we wanted to change it with. We can change it at other locations, but the on-order update placement right here is only for the initial placement of the order.
Mark is asking, let's say that you have 10 contracts on in the market and you want to close 5 of them at 8 ticks, 8-tick profit. Can you give an example of how to do that?
Yeah, Mark. So let's say on our current code right now, if we had enter along with a quantity of 10, and then we came down here and we only want to exit with, when we see our position get filled with, or our entry order get filled, then we come here and then we can place our exit limit with a quantity of 5 instead of 1. So we can say exit limit of 5, and then we can go, our price is. What's nice with these IOrder objects is that instead of saying I want a exit price of 100 here, I can go a limit price of, I can go entry order and check what my fill price on my entry order was by going entry order dot average fill price, and then I can add my 8 ticks onto that fill price. So what you've done is essentially, or what I've done here is essentially say I want my entry order to be 8 ticks above, or I'm sorry, I want my target order to be 8 ticks above my entry order price. And this is a great way to do that, because, now go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and you would like to know, does this work on backtests and market replay as well?
Correct. So all of your strategy code here works on backtest, works on market replay. There's no difference between those, besides the fact that backtesting is historical and market replay will be a simulated real time.
Owen is asking whether or not you can cover using ATM strategies within NinjaScript.
Now, Owen, ATM strategies is possible, but it's not done in these. It's not done in any of these quote-unquote NinjaScript order placement methods. In your help guide, if I scroll up, you'll see this section called ATM strategy methods, and this is a completely different model. Essentially, it's a completely different way to handle strategies. So what I've been talking about is purely automated strategy with purely automate order placement through NinjaScript, and an ATM strategy is you would handle that manually, or it would place it through NinjaScript, but then you would end up manually managing that, and those options are available over here in this ATM strategy methods section. And I believe also in your install of NinjaTrader you have a sample strategy called sample ATM strategy. If you open that up, there's an example code of how you can go ahead and use the NinjaScript strategy to create a strategy revolving around ATM strategies. So that's definitely something that you want to go ahead and read over there, Owen, if this is something that interests you. But I won't be covering that here today. If you have questions, you can use Big Mike forums, you can jump on NinjaTrader forums. We can definitely help you out on that. Okay, so back to the advanced managed approach. I showed you guys some of the additional flexibility with it. There's other additional flexibilities that I'm not going to have time to cover, but I'll briefly touch on where you guys can look for them. In addition to on order update, you guys can actually do additional logic on an event called on execution. So instead of waiting for your orders to update, let's say you had things like partial fills, or you wanted to manage things based on partial fills. To manage a different stops and targets based on how your entry order was filled with partial fills, you can go ahead and use something like on execution to do that. It works basically in the same way as on order update, but instead of triggering on every single order update, it triggers on every single execution event. So every time you get an execution, let's say your entry order of 10 contracts, let's say they filled one contract at a time, you would have 10 different executions. That would mean your on execution would be triggered 10 times, and then you can do whatever logic you need to do there on your on execution. And that's, you can do it from there. You can do it from something called on position update. So if your position switch from a long position to a flat position, you can do that from there as well. So all of these are available in addition to on bar update, and you would utilize them when you're using the advanced managed approach. Richard said, any tips on coding to backtested strategy, especially entries and exits? Richard, the greatest tip I can give is take it one step at a time. You don't want to overly complicate your strategy right from the get-go. I would say layering your strategy logic on top of each other slowly, just to make sure each block that you're adding in works the way you desire it to work. That's probably the best way to create a strategy. That's the best suggestion I can make for that. Cope says, is there a way to open a single order within a strategy and manage this order with NinjaTrader? Cope, the only way to do that is if you create your strategy, your NinjaTrader strategy, with an ATM strategy. So what I mentioned earlier with the ATM strategies, that's not exactly what I'm covering here today, but it is possible when you use it with the ATM strategy. It's not possible to manage on the NinjaTrader your orders generated by the NinjaTrader strategy methods, though. But if you use the ATM strategy methods, that's a different story, and then you can manage those on NinjaTrader then. Okay, so I'm going to jump on over to the unmanaged approach briefly here. And the unmanaged approach, basically, all of the restrictions that I talked about earlier with, you can't bracket your orders, you can't have enter long and enter short at the same time, things like that. Take all of those rules and throw them out the door. So the unmanaged approach basically says that NinjaTrader will not try and prevent you from doing anything that you want to do with your orders. NinjaTrader will allow you to place any order type that you want, but you will be responsible for what the outcome of those orders that you place is. So basically, to use an unmanaged approach, let me go ahead and just delete all of this code here from the managed side. For the unmanaged approach, what you want to do in your initialize method is you want to define your strategy first as an unmanaged strategy. So you need to type unmanaged equals true. And when you do that, then you can go something like, if close is greater than open, I want to go ahead and submit an order. So to submit an order, you just call submit order. And then this is, there's only one signature. You need to fill out exactly what you want it to do. So you can see things like order action, and then you can see you now need to define if it's a buy order, is a buy to cover order, or if it's a a sell short order. If you remember back in the managed side, you did not actually have to define out, is this order a sell order versus a sell short order. And this matters more for the guys that are doing stocks. You have to be sure that you tag your orders correctly. And it just allows you more flexibility over here. So let's say we're just going to do a buy order here. And then your order type would be, you need to declare, is this a market order, is this a limit order, stop order, something like that. So let's go ahead and do a market order. Quantity, let's go 100. Limit price, I don't know, whatever limit price, let's go with high price. And then stop price, I'm not going to use a stop price. Let's go ahead and just leave that at 0. And then OCO ID, so you can see that I can start OCO pairing my orders. Let's just call it OCO1. If you don't want to use an OCO ID or you don't want to pair it with anything, you can just leave that blank. And signal name is, again, just whatever order I want to go, or whatever signal name I want to go with. And when I do this, when I go submit order, what I discussed with the IOrder object still exists on the unmanaged side of it. So I can still go something like entry order equals this submit order object, and I can still manage this stuff in my my on order update. So I can still manage my, I can still manually manage my quote-unquote unmanaged order in whatever method that was available from the advanced managed approach. But what this flexibility does is it takes all of these entry order handling rules, and it says, you know, I'm not going to be following any of these. I need to be aware of, I will manually handle these in my code. And I would not recommend using the unmanaged approach unless you guys are, you know, really sure and really clear on what you guys are doing with this, with your order handling. Because when you use the unmanaged approach, the NinjaTrader will not handle any order rejections and things like that. So let's say if you went something like enter order and then assumed you were in a long position already, that's not going to work, because what if you said enter, you know, you said get me into a long position, but that order was rejected. Then you're not actually in a long position, and then your code needs to handle that. So there's just a lot more additional programming that needs to be done to accommodate for an unmanaged strategy. But again, you get the benefit of it being complete flexibility in how you place your orders and things like that. So it's definitely. Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I want to also mention that there's a user on BMT. His username is NJAMC. I'm not sure what that stands for, but he has created a complete function, I guess you could say, called NT Local Order Manager, and basically it uses the unmanaged orders, right? But it provides a method that you can call to help simplify all the unmanaged order handling. So, you know, it behind the scenes does unmanaged orders, but it provides an interface for you to be able to more simply manage that. So, you know, it's just an idea. It's open source, and everybody can take a look at it. And it does a lot of what Josh was just saying. It does, whenever you do unmanaged orders, then you have to be, you know, very thorough and very responsible for every single possible condition that may happen. So this is a framework that's been created, and it's kind of a group project. So you guys might want to check it out.
Right, and that definitely sounds like something that, you know, at least will help you guys get an idea of what's involved with using an unmanaged strategy code. And you had, can I become a complete list of active orders when I restart my strategy, or continue use of on order update? I think what you're asking is if you're asking if we can get a list of all the active orders from your account right as you start your strategy. And the way NinjaTrader strategies work is that it does not actually read from your account to list all your active orders. What it does is it grabs your active orders, or it grabs orders as calculated historically from a run-through of the strategy on historical data. It does not actually read what's on your account. So you can't necessarily manage what's already existing on your account. Now, I say that with, you know, that's not a hard set rule. You can program the strategy in a manner that, you know, if you know you're in, you know you have a particular order, you can program a strategy that says that you define it to say, hey, I'm going to be in this particular order at the start of the strategy, and then have the strategy logic take over handling of it. So there are ways, or quote-unquote workarounds, that you can utilize with that. But by default, and as a general rule of thumb, NinjaTrader strategies do not read what is already on your account. Hopefully that helps. Rick says, what again is the path in the help tree to the order management documentation. Rick, the path is if you open the help guide, it's going to show you this kind of tree, and you want to go NinjaScript, and then language reference, and then strategy, and then under strategy you'll have order methods. And then alternatively, if you don't want to remember that, you can just go into the search and just type manage, for instance, and then that'll get you to the unmanaged approach. If you click on the unmanaged approach, you can go back to the managed approach. So if you just remember the term managed or unmanaged, you should be able to find this section in the help guide through the search button for that. NinjaTrader said, how do we add modifier keys to the orders to manually move the targets and stops either up or down? NinjaTrader, I'm not sure what you mean by modifier keys. If you're trying to manually manipulate an order, you would do so through an ATM strategy. That would be your best bet. If you're using an ATM strategy, then let's say on your chart trader or your Superdome, you can move those orders by moving you click and move those orders around on the chart or on the Superdome. So that would be the best way to go about that, NinjaTrader. Hill had a question. I have a problem. How can you solve when I have a ground open long 1? After that, I want to scale in, and I open a parallel, a new long 2. After that, open an extra long 3. After that, I close long 2 of 70%. After that, long 3 of 7%. After that, remaining in long 2 and long 3 at the end. Whole quantity of ground long 1. How can I so many order to manage easily at once when I use iExecution to attach the properties of the orders to IOrder? Hill, that's so look, it sounds like you're using a scale-in strategy, and to use a scale-in strategy, the first thing that you want to do is remember earlier I mentioned the entries per direction. You want to bump your entries per direction up to 3 at least. So once you bump that up to 3, then you can start your scale out stuff. So your scale out stuff, if you want to do it in chunks like that, so 70% of your exit, you want to go ahead and just call your exit methods with the correct quantity you want to match it up to. If you are using iExecution, I guess I don't know exactly what your thoughts are on how you are going to utilize iExecution in this instance, but like the on-order update, the on-execution method, you are able to figure out which execution the particular execution came from, or which order the particular execution came from. You can do something like, if you had an iExecution, let me quickly add this in here. If you had protected override void on execution, and you had an execution trigger this event, you can go execution.order and then .name. And then what that does is that gives you which order triggered this execution, and then you can devise whatever kind of logic you wanted based off of where this execution came from. And then maybe you want to exit 70%, 30%, or something like that. You can define how you exactly want to do that based on that. Hopefully that answers your question there, Hill. You said I sent the long limit, long stop in iExecution. Right. So you can definitely send your your exit orders from the iExecution from there. So if you want to scale, let me see what you said. You said after you scale in, you want to close the long of 2. I guess I don't know what your logic is as to, or what your desired logic is as to when you actually want to close your long 2, but if you want to close your long 2 right as long 3 fills, so if your long 3 fills, let's say your long 3's name was came from an IOrder, if it came from an IOrder name of long 3, or actually you can just go, if execution.order equals, my long 3 order, let's pretend that I had a long 3 IOrder object. I can go ahead and check that comparison like that, and then I can go, then I do my, my exit long limit or whatever, and then my exit long stop. And then for those, I could put in my desired quantities and then exit those based on, the logic that you're trying. Hopefully that answered your question there. If that was it's a little complicated question, but if you have additional questions on that, you can definitely jump on our forums. We can help you out further because that's a little bit hard to describe in the webinar right now. Philippe had a question, not being a programmer, how do I get help once I have a strategy idea and want to test it? Philippe, the best way to get help is, you can join any of our webinars. We can help you out on our webinars. But the best place, since you're a non-programmer, I would recommend joining our webinar that discusses what we call the Strategy Wizard, which is this screen over here. We have a free webinar every week that walks you through the Strategy Wizard, and the Strategy Wizard requires 0 programming knowledge, and you don't actually have to touch any of the code. And for the most part, you can create pretty robust strategies right from the Strategy Wizard, so you don't actually have to worry about the programming at all. But if you need help after joining us in the webinar, you can send an email to us, support@ninjatrader.com, and that's probably your best bet, or at least best starting place for getting your strategy up and running. Hill said, my problem when I use many open and at the last close won't close all open quantity, the NT will remain couple quantity and it will confuse and I don't know why. Hill, I guess definitely send in a support email. We can work through your exact example. That would make the most sense. If you send an email to support@ninjatrader.com, we can take a look at exactly what you may be facing, and then we can decide or figure out what may be going on with your example over there. Okay, guys, so that's basically what I wanted to cover here today. Hopefully that gave you guys a little bit of understanding on what's available order placement wise. I know I was a little bit talking about different topics here and there, but hopefully it gives you a introduction on the managed approaches, the unmanaged approaches, and the decision that you guys have to make at the beginning, which is do I want ease of programming or do I want flexibility? And there's no right or wrong way to go about creating your strategies. Like I mentioned earlier, the best way to make your strategies is take it one step at a time. You don't want to overly complicate your strategy right from the get-go, because that makes your debugging task that much harder. So if you take it one step at a time, do it slowly, make sure everything works the way you want it, and then later on the next level, that just makes your life that much easier. And good luck with your own creations of strategies. It's incredibly fun to make strategies. I find it's incredibly fun. Backtesting, you guys definitely want to backtest your strategy before throwing it live, and definitely forward test your strategy as well, either through market replay or just running your strategy, on a simulated account during market hours. Those are the suggestions I have for making strategies. If you guys have any questions, you guys can definitely shoot us an email at support@ninjatrader.com, and we'll be happy to help you guys out. And Paul had one last question. How can I replay this seminar? Paul, I believe this seminar or webinar was recorded, and it will be available sometime tomorrow. Okay, thank you guys. And if you guys have any questions, definitely shoot us an email.
All right, thanks, Josh. And again, so the email address for Josh and the NinjaTrader team is support@ninjatrader.com, and you guys can look for the recording of the webinar on BMT sometime tomorrow. Thanks, guys.